Good evening, yeah, and welcome to Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation. I'm Jackie Mumford and I'll be flying solo tonight because Chris, my comrade on this event usually, is somewhere else on the internet hosting a different, probably less good online talk. And for tonight's edition of Cocktails, it's especially timely thanks to John Barilaro and friends at the Nationals Party of New South Wales. This week, Nationals MPs have been revolting over plans to strengthen koala protections in New South Wales. And tonight we're going to be talking koalas. But before I introduce tonight's guest, I'll run us through the ground rules. If you need a drink, please grab one. I can see in the chat there lots of people already have a drink in hand. We're recording the talk tonight, so you can watch it back later if you'd like. If you're on social media, the hashtag to use is hashtag Nature's Happy Hour. And please use the chat. We love to see where you're calling from. You might want to jump in there to share what cocktail you're drinking tonight, what Aboriginal land you're calling in from. And of course, any questions you have for Kai, please post them in the chat. All importantly, if you are enjoying yourself tonight, go along to nature.org.au and send us some money, because koalas grow on trees, money does not. And tonight I'm talking to Kai Wild. Kai is a wildlife carer and arborist. After the devastating bushfires last summer, Kai volunteered his tree climbing skills for a koala rescue operation on Kangaroo Island. G'day Kai, thanks for joining me tonight for Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation.
Thanks Jackie, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So I'd love to start just by hearing about your experience on KI. What did you see when you got there and what did you do?
Sure. Yeah, like I went there with really, not a lot of expectations at all of what I was in for. Really, I just prepared myself to be asked to leave and told I wasn't going to be needed. And excuse me. And arriving at Penyshaw, it didn't look like there'd been any bushfires really. And probably driving another 50 kilometers to Pandana, that's when you really started to see just the total devastation of the islands there. And it really escalated quickly to just all of a sudden you're just amongst all this this completely devastated landscape with burnt koalas everywhere. And it's really, you can't be prepared for that. And I wasn't really expecting to see that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And how long after the fires did you head down?
Yeah, it had been a couple of weeks since the worst fires. And the day I arrived, it was, I think, about 43-degree day, and there was concern that hotspots would flare up. And fortunately they didn't. And then the next day it was, I think, the heaviest rains they'd had in years. And so it was this really interesting time to arrive on the islands.
For sure.
Yeah.
And what did you see? What was going on the ground there? Was there Parks and Wildlife Service active, or who else was around?
So there was, what did I see? I mean, basically I had this kind of tunnel vision going on where I was just based at the hospital, and I saw all the hospital volunteers and Sam and Dana who were running the show. And then I was out in these plantations basically all the time, maybe 95% of the time, searching for koalas in burnt, pretty much devastated plantations that used to have thousands of koalas in them.
It's pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
And I think at that time bushfires were sort of raging a lot of the across a lot of the east coast of Australia as well, and a lot of sort of devastation. Why Kangaroo Island? What was it that took you down there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been helping with the SES in New South Wales, in southern New South Wales, and I'd seen that they'd needed volunteers to help with wildlife. And then, I saw that they had that overwhelming response. So I just didn't think any more about it. And then, yeah, I just got this Facebook message out of the blue one night. Someone on Kangaroo Island looking for a tree climber to reach a koala. And yeah, that's kind of all I needed to know. And headed down the next day. I had, it crossed my mind and I'd wanted to help, and I had no idea actually that there was that amount of koalas on Kangaroo Island. That was wild, and I kind of discovered that the day I arrived. But yeah, just I've got a bit of koala handling experience and wildlife experience, and I can climb trees. So
Yeah,
that flexibility of being self-employed, just that really enabled me to get down there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how many koalas did you meet when you were down
Yeah, I met a lot of.
there?
They were everywhere, everywhere. But yeah, I would have helped to rescue. I think that's 107 in total in the 7 weeks I was there. Yeah, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge effort. What was it like, for the koalas that you did rescue? Can you just paint a bit of a picture for us? Like, were they, were their habitat completely burnt out? Were there some, was there some surviving sort of trees and habitat? What did it look like?
Yeah, so you've got these blue gum plantations that are, tens of hundreds of hectares, and yeah, the fire just tore through them, and so they'd pretty much be all burnt out except for a thin green slither on some of the edges, and that's where you'd find the koalas survived. And and the ones that were probably the worst affected would just stay put in those green slithers because they couldn't move about, but they had a bit of food source there. And then we ended up kind of discovering that the ones that were the most healthy would actually get about, and you'd find them in the completely burnt out areas. And so that was a kind of interesting contrast, that the healthier the tree, sometimes you'd find the worst of koala, and in the worst areas you'd find the healthiest koalas.
So it's in those sort of remaining green strips where they could still find some food.
And that was really helpful to be able to easily identify where they would be.
And when you found, were koalas most often in trees, or were they on the ground, or where were they when you found them?
So before I arrived and just after the fires, most of the koalas were being found on the ground, and they were really badly injured, and so people would just come and scoop them up. And I guess after a certain amount of time that stopped, people stopped finding those koalas, and so it was the koalas that were left in these trees that I guess people either didn't realize were there or didn't have a way of accessing that easily. That would kind of just be left to
And how long were you down there for on Kangaroo Island?
So 7 weeks in total. And it was really fortunate that as coronavirus was getting serious in Australia, we were basically seeing that there was we'd finished what we were there to do, and we weren't finding any more koalas that needed help.
Just curious about the process. So you find a koala in a tree that's maybe injured or doesn't have access to food. Where did you take them, and who was caring for them?
Sure. So Sam and Dana from the Kangaroo Island Wildlife Park just kind of established this koala hospital within their park. And it started off as just like this tent, and then it turned into the army tent, and then a demountable, and then and that was a really slick operation, like really well coordinated. It had just wildlife organizations and vets, and state government, and the ADF, like just kind of all came together to try and help koalas. And that was really actually interesting and powerful to see that kind of response, like this real this genuine collaborative effort from people from all different walks of life, and with all different beliefs. And I could really kind of appreciate that this can, like things like climate change, for example, like we can actually achieve this. We put aside like small differences and really see the bigger picture here.
Yeah, and something like the koala, it's so iconic, and I think a lot of people have a soft spot in their heart for koalas. So totally see how people would pull together at the time of crisis.
Yeah.
I just had a question come through. What were the trees like after the fires that you were having to climb? Were the trees that you were climbing burnt out, and what was that sort of like for your safety?
Yeah, so again, most of the koalas, fortunately, were in these green slithers, which meant they were the least fire affected trees. So that was a bit safer in that regard. But still, they had been fire affected. They got shallow root plates. We did see lots of them, like the whole entire tree had failed. Some of them would just like snap off halfway, and there was a risk of tree failure. And so we had to be really careful. And it helps to be an arborist, and you really need to know what you're looking at and inspect trees carefully. And there were trees that we couldn't climb and wouldn't climb, and we ended up being able to use some of the donations I was given to hire a boom lift and make access safer. But because they were plantation trees, they're generally just single stem and pretty straightforward to climb as far as trees go.
Yeah.
And
do you know what's going on like on Kangaroo Island now in terms of revegetation? Like, are the trees growing back, or how's it going?
Like everything's slowly slowly growing back, I guess. I'm personally interested to see like what that regrowth, like what the structures of those trees ends up being like. Have they been like permanently compromised? Will they just never be the same again? Like, it's going to be interesting to see, I think. And people, they are finding little pockets of, or like, surviving wildlife, and that's really positive. But it's going to take a long time for the place to recover.
Yeah, for sure. And there's some questions coming through about what happened with the koalas that you saved. Were any of them relocated to the mainland, or were they able to be re-released back onto the island? You want to tell us a bit about that? And I think you have a story, a good news story after all the sort of sad
I don't know
stuff.
if I'm even going to tell you about that, but I will. It's certainly like many of the koalas were released back onto the island for sure. And I don't know if any of the rescued koalas were taken. Excuse me, God. Taken to the mainland. But I did just find out that my special koala Joey Kai, was released about half an hour ago. So that's I've kind of got like nerves, and that was a really, really massive, significant deal. And,
oh, that's wonderful.
That's a really nice thing. It's really nice to be able to share that right now with you and everyone who's here. Like,
Can you tell us a bit about Joey Kai? Like, where did you find him, and yeah, how long was he in care and stuff before he was released?
Yeah. So it was a she, but
A she, sorry, yeah.
well, doesn't make a difference really. Yeah, she was just the first burnt orphan Joey that I found, alone in a tree. And yeah, that experience is just like really hits you really hard. And I just expected that she would need to be euthanized. Like, she was kind of looking that bad, and that's what I was prepared for. And then, to find out that she was probably going to be okay was like, yeah, just as hard hitting as finding her in the first place, I guess, in a good way. And then she just became like my little beacon of hope for like the next 7 weeks. And I guess like for the last 7 months too, that she's been being cared for and rehabilitated. Like, I've just held on to that hope that she's going to be okay. And because I guess there can be complications that you don't know about. And so, yeah, it's really remarkable. And yeah, really, yeah, it's
A good news story amongst
great.
all
Yeah,
the
it's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know, like, will Joey Kai be monitored, or other koalas that get released, like, are they being monitored or, sort of tracked to see how they go?
I believe, yeah, they get microchipped, and yeah, I don't think there's any kind of monitoring program happening there. So she just gets to be free, which is really good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And some, some of the questions coming through from the audience tonight, and I know this is a big question that we hear a lot in this in the in this field and the work that we do. At Nature Conservation Council, we work a lot on climate change and deforestation and these issues that often create a lot of grief. It's really hard to work on this stuff, and so I'm sure some of the things that you saw in Kangaroo Island would have been really traumatic for you. And people are wondering, like, how did you sort of deal with that, and how did you manage to keep going?
Yeah. I mean, it was really tough. Like, I've never done anything that was harder than that emotionally, I think. And I just didn't realize. Yeah, you don't know until you're sitting there eating your breakfast and you're sobbing, or you're like, yeah, like, these are the things that were happening. Like, just even getting a message from a supportive message from someone, or reading a message of support from someone, and just like being so emotionally affected. And so that was quite interesting to observe in myself. And yeah, like, I'm a big advocate for like everyone seeing a counselor. Basically, you don't need to be in crisis to have someone on your side, basically. And what was really wonderful was that, I had already seen a counselor earlier, maybe 6 months, a year earlier, because I had other, things going on in my life that I wanted to kind of process. And because I had that person already there and had that relationship established, when I was in crisis, I had that support there. And that was a really good learning, and like something that I'd love other people to really take away. And you don't have to be, again, like in this like devastated, fire affected zone, even though so many people are now. But the climate grief that people would be experiencing now, like, is really significant, and it does just slowly kind of affect you and work away at you. And yeah, totally, I think it's so reasonable that everyone should be, yes, getting counseling for that stuff and trying to process it, because it's heavy stuff.
And I think more and more climate grief and sort of eco grief, and these concepts that probably seemed like quite abstract ideas until not very long ago are actually becoming more and more recognized, and the impacts that they're having on our lives, for sure.
Absolutely.
And so what, like, in your opinion, is a sort of, is it a bushfire management issue? What is it, a climate issue? Like, how do we prevent devastation like this from, continuing to worsen and happening again?
I mean, and this is one of the kind of sad things, is like, this is what we needed to start acting on 30 years ago, right? Because this is where it's got us. And I guess I mean, we have no choice, right? We have to decarbonize our economy, and we have to just accept that we can't cut down all the trees everywhere without just completely destroying the natural environment that we depend on, let alone koalas and wildlife. And but we have to do it. Yeah, we have to do it with, like, I guess, justice in mind as well. And for me personally, I think if we strive to achieve, I guess, climate justice or environmental justice, and like really recognize, like, where I guess, what am I trying to say?
Sort of interconnectedness of these issues. And
yeah, I mean, things like, for example, racism and sexism, and all of those, really terrible things that are within our society. And I guess for me, it's like, well, if we just have to strive to achieve that. And I guess I get some kind of it's hard for me to explain, but it makes me feel slightly better if I'm like completely terrified about the future, that okay, like there's still like steps we can take along the way. Or
just when you mentioned that, no, definitely, I think the interconnectedness of these issues of social injustices are something that historically the environment movement hasn't been great at identifying, and I think to our own detriment. And one of the things that has come up, particularly after the devastating bushfires of last summer, is Indigenous land management and Indigenous fire management. For managing the land. Is that something that you came across at all on Kangaroo Island, or that you've seen anywhere?
I didn't personally come across it on Kangaroo Island. I haven't really had anything to do with it, but I did see a program recently where it just makes so much sense. It's just so gentle on the land, and of course, like, it's been done for tens of thousands of years sustainably. So of course, so just like farming, for example. So that's one really great thing that's, I guess, come out of this, is that focus.
For sure. And what are you working on next, Kai? What are you up to now? And is there any way that people can, follow what you're up to and get involved?
Yeah, so life's been pretty crazy with coronavirus, and lots of disruption and change. But just finished writing this book. I've not done this before.
Yeah, show us.
I'm going to do it now. I finished writing my book.
The 99th Koala. Oh, that's beautiful.
99th Koala, yeah. And that'll be available from the 5th of November.
Amazing.
And you can pre-order, and it's a pretty nice thing to support, your kind of local independent bookstores, if you can. And we're trying to work out overseas shipment. But I've been working on that, and that's really, really amazing to have completed. And I live in New South Wales, and we've just had a parliamentary inquiry that's told us that koalas are going to be extinct in this state, within a few decades, basically, and that's probably if we're lucky. So land clearings increased in New South Wales 13-fold. How much forest and habitat we lost over the summer due to the bushfires. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and advocacy, right? And I just think if we know something, then we can care about something, and if we care about something, then we'll, you know, want to act on it basically, or want to do something about it. And so it just seems like there's a lot of people that don't even realize how significant the situation is. And so I think, yeah, this kind of the privilege I have of having a platform now, and this voice, I just want to really make the most of it. And I kind of, yeah, I feel I have an obligation and a responsibility to do that. And so I think for everyone listening, I think those are the steps, you know, like learn about it and care about it, and make it so other people do as well, and make sure, yeah, our representatives really understand just how many people care about these things, and maybe they'll be less willing to just ignore us, or
for sure. And I think, you know, taking action, like, well, for me anyway, that goes to the, you know, what you were saying about climate grief and how we deal with these things. I think taking action is one of the best, you know, best forms of hope that we have as well. So I think
absolutely,
that's, really great point. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us tonight. It's been so lovely to hear about your experience. You know, it's sort of tragic and, you know, dark it has been. There's also, you know, great to hear some of those stories of hope, and what wonderful timing to hear about Joey Kai being released back into the wild.
Yeah, pretty amazing timing there. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Kai. And
fine,
we've put a link in the chat there to buy Kai's book. So if you'd like to get in and pre-order, get your Christmas presents sorted, you can do that with a link in the chat. So thanks so much. We'll be back in 2 weeks for Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation for Voice Treaty Truth. And we'll be joined by Thomas Mayer talking about the Uluru Statement. So hope to see you all in 2 weeks. Tell your friends if you enjoy Nature's Happy Hour, send them the link, get them to come along. And if you want to support the work that we do at NCC, including some really important advocacy work around climate change and deforestation, you can head along to nature.org.au. Thanks so much for joining us, and see you in 2 weeks.